Afternoon, class. For this week's topic, I decided to go back and springboard off of a previous topic that I discussed concerning the economy of the South um, during and following the Civil War. Um, of the three articles I found, they were really interesting in discussing the economy of the South uh, during that latter part of the Civil War and into the Reconstruction phase. The first of the three articles I found is entitled The Postbellum Recovery of the South and the Cost of the Civil War by Peter Temin. In his article, Timon discusses the three main areas for the South's economic struggle following the Civil War. He says that the first point of discussion is that the lessening demand for cotton during the late antebellum period and early on during the Civil War was a cause for the South's economic decline during and after the Civil War. We all know that before, in that antebellum period, the South was really relying on that cotton production, sending it to Great Britain for production. And then as the war progressed, things became worse during the war for the South, and especially following the war, the production of cotton all but diminished for the majority of the southern states. A second reason Tennant says that the South struggled following the Civil War was the loss of slave labor as the passage of the 13th Amendment and their emancipation. Before the Civil War, production output was at its highest point concerning cotton. Countries like Great Britain was at its peak for purchasing cotton from the South for the production purposes within the country. Following the Civil War and the emancipation of the slaves, the labor force was all but diminished, except what was left of indentured servitude, which I'll talk about in the third article that I found, leaving the South without its mass labor system. No longer could the South meet demands for cotton production, nor were the demands there due to the politics of the war. The South struggled to get back onto its feet in building a labor force free from slaves that could support an industry going forward. Timmons' third point in his article is that the war itself had far less effects on the South's economy compared to that of the loss of cotton as an industry and the loss of its labor force. Timmons says that because of the world demand for cotton and the effects of emancipation on the South's labor force. He also says that the assumption can be made that income would have fallen in the case of the South at a uniform rate between 1860 and 1879 due to the falling demand for cotton and the loss of the labor force. The second article I found, entitled The Roots of Black Poverty, the Southern Plantation Economy After the Civil War, written by J.R. Mandel, kind of follows the root of what happens to the freed slaves in response to the Civil War. Mandel says that the many contemporaries anticipated two outcomes of Northern victory during the Civil War. The first one, he says, was advancement economically, socially, politically of the newly freed blacks, and two, the expected improvement of black performance in a free labor market. However, sources show that the Southern economy post-Civil War was stagnant and provided little progress for freed slaves following emancipation. The slow growth of Southern manufacturing and the bias against employing blacks severely limited their job opportunities. Technological advances led to the reduced hours required for labor, leaving many freed slaves jobless during the aftermath of the Civil War. So, we've got a lot of technological advances due to the Civil War itself, even prior to in the antebellum period with things such as the cotton gin, and then leading up to all that technological advance during the war, led to the demise of the slavery industry along with the emancipation of the slaves, especially since we had the technology that could overproduce what the slaves could in their mass form before the Civil War. And then finally, the third article I found is entitled Black Family Formation and Tenancy in the Farm South. 1900. And this is written by Stuart E. Tolnay. Um, and this really follows the freed slaves' lives during during the post-war period. Um, During Reconstruction, because of the slave industry had all but been erased, um, even though now that the slaves had been freed, they still needed something to do to make a living by. So Tone discusses this in his article, and he discusses the move from a plantation society to that of a tenant farming society for the freed slaves following the Civil War. While this form of labor did provide the families with housing, food, and somewhat of a living, it mimicked the old plantation society by keeping the slaves bound to a certain farm in order to reap the benefits and monetary gain as a result of their labor. Tournay describes the biggest economic disadvantage for these tenant families was their hopelessness of their economic position in the New South. Because of their difficulty to acquire a new line of credit, most African Americans were never able to purchase land of their own, leaving them dependent upon the white landowners for support under the tenant farming guidelines. Tolnay discusses in his article that he believes that the tenant farming method led to greater strains on the black families associated with the system, and further drove the African American communities further apart during the Reconstruction period. I hope this discussion has been of some interest to you. It definitely is of me discussing the economic impacts of the Civil War and then what it did to those families thereafter the end of the war. Again, thanks for watching, and I look forward to your discussions for this week. Have a great afternoon.